standing in a fairway bunker on the 72nd hole of the U.S. Open with a one-shot lead and a major championship on the line. Matt Fitzpatrick pulled a 9-iron and hit what he'd later call simply one of the best shots I ever hit. The ball started on a line around the steep lip of the bunker, cleared it, and settled 18 feet from the flag. Par win. First major championship of his career. Here's a detail that turns that moment from a great story into an almost unbelievable one. That fairway, that green, that entire golf course was the exact same course where a teenage Matt Fitzpatrick had won the U.S. Amateur Championship 9 years earlier. He'd become just the second golfer in history after Jack Nicklaus to win the U.S. Amateur and the U.S. Open on the same course. So the resume clearly has a major champion on it. But 3 years after that Brookline afternoon, Fitzpatrick's world ranking cratered outside the top 70. He called it the worst golf he'd ever played, and he said the Ryder Cup was miles off his radar. Then he rebuilt everything and became one of the form players in the world again. So which version is the real one? Let's find out how good Matt Fitzpatrick actually is. Matt Fitzpatrick was born in Sheffield, England in September 1994. Into a family where golf ran deep, his father Russell introduced both Matt and his younger brother Alex to the game early, and both boys ended up playing professionally. Off the course, Matt has stayed a lifelong devoted supporter of Sheffield United, the kind of hometown loyalty that's followed him his entire career. His amateur record is one of the best any modern pro ever built before turning professional. He won the 2012 Boys Amateur Championship. In 2013, he won low amateur honors at the Open Championship, making the cut as a teenager against the world's best professionals. And that same summer, he won the U.S. Amateur Championship at the Country Club in Brookline, Massachusetts, with his 14-year-old brother Alex on his bag as caddy. The following year, he added low amateur honors at the U.S. Open too, making him the first golfer since the legendary Bobby Jones to hold low amateur status at both the Open Championship and the U.S. Open at the same time. He enrolled at Northwestern University to play college golf, lasted one semester, and turned professional in 2014, deciding the amateur ranks had nothing left to teach him. Fitzpatrick's rise on the DP World Tour was fast and steady, and he'd go on to collect 10 titles there over his career, including 2 season-ending tour championships. By 2016, at just 22 years old, he'd made Europe's Ryder Cup team, becoming the youngest player on either side that week at Hazeltine, a rookie thrown straight into one of the most hostile road environments in the sport. But the Ryder Cup, for years, was the one place Fitzpatrick's game simply didn't show up. He lost both his matches at Hazeltine in 2016 as Europe fell to a 17-11 defeat. He went 0-3 at Whistling Straits in 2021 in an even more lopsided rout for the away side. By the time he arrived at the 2023 Ryder Cup in Rome, his career record stood at an ugly 0 wins, 5 losses, 0 halves, a stat that would have quietly ended most players' captain's pick conversations for years to come, and one that started to look less like bad luck and more like a genuine pattern. Off the course and in how he approaches the game itself, Fitzpatrick has built a reputation as one of the most meticulous, detail-obsessed players in professional golf. Where some pros trust feel and instinct, Fitzpatrick has always leaned hard into data, strokes gained statistics, precise yardages, a relentless focus on eliminating whatever specific weakness shows up in the numbers that week. Teammates and commentators regularly describe him as the kind of player who treats his own game like a running spreadsheet, always trying to find the next half stroke of improvement. rather than chasing a feeling. Even his equipment choices reflect it. He's largely stayed a free agent across brands rather than committing to one manufacturer's full bag, picking whichever clubs test best rather than whichever pays the most. That obsessiveness is exactly why the 2024 and early 2025 stretch that was coming would be so jarring, because for a player whose entire identity was built on control and precision, losing that control publicly for over a year cut differently than it would have for almost anyone else on tour. Which brings us back to where we started. The 2022 U.S. Open at the Country Club in Brookline was a genuine three-way brawl on the back nine, with Fitzpatrick, Will Zalatoris, and that year's Masters champion, Scottie Scheffler, all within a shot of each other. Fitzpatrick took control with a big break and an even bigger shot on the 15th hole for a two-shot swing. Scheffler bogeyed back-to-back holes to start the back nine and never fully recovered. Then came the 18th, the bunker, the 9-iron, the par that won it by a single stroke over Zalatoris, who watched his own 15-foot birdie attempt slide by the cup to force what would have been a playoff. Fitzpatrick walked away with the U.S. Open trophy, the Jack Nicklaus gold medal around his neck, and $3.15 million, his first professional win on American soil and his first major. It is so cliche, he said afterward, but it's stuff you dream of as a kid. At 27 years old, on the same fairways where he'd once been a promising 18-year-old amateur, Matt Fitzpatrick had become a major champion. The following year brought two more signature moments. In April 2023, Fitzpatrick won the RBC Heritage at Harbour Town, beating two-time major champion Jordan Spieth in a three-hole playoff. His second PGA Tour title, sealed with an approach shot to within a single foot on the deciding hole. Then came the Ryder Cup in Rome that September, and the moment his career record there finally turned. Paired with Rory McIlroy in four-ball play, Fitzpatrick played his first 6 holes in stunning form, helping the duo demolish the American pairing of Xander Schauffele and Colin Morikawa 5-3. It was his first Ryder Cup point ever after 5 straight losses across 2 prior appearances, and it came against 2 of the best players in the world. Not a soft draw he could point to as an easy win. Europe won the Cup outright that week, 16.5 points to 11.5, and for the first time, Fitzpatrick looked like the player his regular tour form had always promised in the one event that had eluded him. Then, almost without warning, it all came apart. In 2024, Fitzpatrick dealt with what he then later described as equipment mishaps, disrupting his feel for the game, and managed just 2 top 5 finishes in 25 worldwide starts. He didn't win a single event that year, his first winless season since 2019. Heading into 2025 Ryder Cup qualifying, he found himself 83rd in the European standings 9 months before Bethpage Black. Early 2025 was worse. He split from Billy Foster, his longtime veteran caddy, and admitted publicly to playing the worst golf I've ever played. He hadn't recorded a single top 10 finish since the previous June. By April, he'd sunk to 75th in the world rankings, missed 2 cuts in a row, and limped to a tie for 40th at the Masters. Asked about his Ryder Cup chances that same week, Fitzpatrick didn't sugarcoat it. The competition, he said, was miles off his radar. For a player whose entire game was built on control and precision, this wasn't a rough patch. It looked for a stretch like it might be the beginning of the end. And then somehow, across a single summer, Fitzpatrick rebuilt the entire season. He credited part of it to a conscious effort, something he said he'd been working on for 15 months, to be more forgiving with himself and more understanding of his own psychology under pressure, rather than treating every bad round as a data failure to be corrected overnight. Whatever the cause, the results were immediate. an 8th place finish at the PGA Championship in May, a 4th at the Open Championship, another 4th at the Genesis Scottish Open, top 6 finishes at the Betfred British Masters and the Omega European Masters to close out the summer exactly when Luke Donald had asked him to deliver. Donald had specifically requested he play both of those closing events to prove his form, and Fitzpatrick answered both times. It worked. On September 1st, 2025, Donald called Fitzpatrick with Europe's final captain's pick for Bethpage Black. Nobody has statistically been as good as Matt has in the last 3 or 4 months, Donald told him on the call. It would be Fitzpatrick's 4th Ryder Cup appearance. And after 3 appearances that had produced almost nothing to show for it, quite possibly his last real chance to prove he belonged in the conversation at all. Bethpage Black finally delivered the Ryder Cup week Fitzpatrick had been chasing since 2016. Paired with Ludwig Oberg in Friday foursomes, he helped dismantle Scottie Scheffler and Russell Henley 5-3. He and Oberg took another match together over the weekend. In singles on Sunday, Fitzpatrick raced out to a 5-up lead over Bryson DeChambeau through 7 holes, or a borderline demolition, before DeChambeau mounted one of the tournament's great fightbacks to salvage a half point, the only blemish on what was otherwise Fitzpatrick's best week in the competition's history. Europe held on to win 15-13, surviving a historic American comeback bid on the final day. Fitzpatrick finished the week 2 wins, 1 loss, and 1 half. Instantly, the best Ryder Cup of his career, and enough to push his all-time record to 3 wins, 8 losses, and 1 half across 4 appearances. It wasn't a flawless record, but it was finally proof that the numbers he trusted so much could show up on the sport's biggest stage too. Whatever Fitzpatrick found that summer, he carried it straight into 2026. In the spring, he won the Valspar Championship. Weeks later, he won the RBC Heritage for the 2nd time in his career, this time beating Scottie Scheffler himself on the first playoff hole. A full circle moment against the same player he'd out-dueled at Brookline 4 years earlier, and a genuine statement that his best golf could now beat the best player in the world head-to-head, not just on a career-defining Sunday, but on a random spring week too. Then, at the Zurich Classic of New Orleans, he teamed up with his younger brother Alex, the same brother who'd caddied for him as a 14-year-old at that U.S. Amateur, and the Fitzpatrick brothers won together by a single shot, with Alex earning a 2-year PGA Tour exemption alongside the win. 3 wins in a single spring against fields that included the best players alive less than a year removed from a world ranking outside the top 70. It's hard to find a cleaner turnaround story anywhere else in the sport right now. So, how good is Matt Fitzpatrick actually? Start with a resume. 1 major championship, 10 DP World Tour titles, 4 PGA Tour wins and counting, a U.S. Amateur and U.S. Open won on the exact same golf course, and a Ryder Cup record that's gone from one of the worst on either team to genuinely respectable in the space of a single dramatic week. What makes Fitzpatrick's case interesting isn't dominance. It's resilience applied over and over to a game he's always tried to solve like a puzzle rather than feel his way through. He's had a true peak at Brookline in 2022. He's also had a real collapse in 2024 and early 2025, public and painful enough that he described it in exactly those terms himself. And then he built his way back to the top of the sport, almost entirely through the meticulous, detail-obsessed process that defines how he plays golf in the first place. Not through one hot week, but through through a full season of grinding the data back in his favor. The fairest verdict is this: Matt Fitzpatrick isn't a generational talent who never has bad stretches. His own career proves otherwise. But he is one of the most complete, self-aware competitors in the game, a major champion who's shown he can fall out of the world's top 70 and climb all the way back to beating Scottie Scheffler in a playoff within 12 months. That's not the resume of someone who got lucky once at Brookline. That's the resume of someone who keeps finding his way back no matter how far the game pushes him down first. If you want more deep dives into the players writing the most interesting stories in golf right now, subscribe and let us know in the comments who we should break down next.